Hello, happy Thursday, and welcome to the Newsmax Daily for December 19th, 2024. We won't be saying that much longer, right? The second to last Thursday of the month, which means it's the second to last Thursday of the year. 6 days until Christmas and the start of Hanukkah, and today is National Oatmeal Muffin Day. One of the first foods ever invented or created, I guess, combining a sweet treat with something that's actually healthy, and it actually tastes good. If you ordered a Christmas or Hanukkah gift, by the way, on Amazon, thousands of Amazon workers in several cities went on strike this morning.
We're fired up! We're fired up! We're fired up! We're fired up! We'll take no more! We're fired up! We'll take no more!
New York, Atlanta, and several other major hubs were fired up. We'll take no more. That's the chant from Amazon union workers. There's also breaking news this morning out of Georgia, where an appeals court has disqualified Fulton County District Attorney Fani Willis from overseeing the criminal election case there against President Trump and a handful of other folks. The case will stand, according to the appeals court, but Fani Willis is out. And thank you to Kay Hill-Smythe for filling in yesterday. And what a day it turned out to be, right? On Capitol Hill and on the stock markets. Back on Monday, I warned you about Wednesday's interest rate announcement. The Federal Reserve did cut rates 25 basis points, which is 1/4 percentage point. Don't believe the headlines about how it's going to save you money or help anything, really. 1/4 point isn't jack. But more important, Jerome the Profit Killer Powell did it again. Had to go on and talk about inflation and how there may not be another interest rate cut for a while, which completely tanked the markets. The NASDAQ losing more than 700 points, more than 3.5%. The Dow, now on its biggest losing streak in 40 years, lost more than 1,000 points yesterday, 2.5%, and the S&P 500 lost about 3%. Thankfully, the markets are bouncing back a bit today, as you would have expected. The Dow Jones Industrial Average opening up over 300 points. But why does this guy always have to give a big speech, right? Can't you just give the good news, say a couple things, and move on? He is another guy high on power. That's what I think it is. I mean, shut the heck up already. Jerome Powell's salary listed at around $200,000 a year. He was an attorney, then an investment banker. His net worth is reported to be between 40 and 50 million. Some say even higher than 50 million. Why would he take a job for $200,000 a year? For power. Same reason a lot of politicians become lifelong politicians, which takes us to the power struggle on Capitol Hill over the funding bill. Chris Salcedo, host of the Chris Salcedo Show, afternoons on Newsmax, explains.
Americans should be burning up the Capitol Hill switchboard after you hear today's preamble. The so-called continuing resolution is another fake budget, and it's a lie. An actual continuing resolution would continue the massive pandemic-level inflation-causing government overspending that has been happening since the pandemic, even though the China virus pandemic is long over. Your treacherous Congress has become addicted to your great-great-grandkids' money. But this continuing resolution actually increases overspending, and not by a little. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene explains.
Well, it's really turning into, it's not a CR, which is a continuation of the budget. It's turning into an omnibus, is what it sounds like to me, where they're packing in, everybody's packing in what they want here and there, and using the pressure and the situation of the government shutdown. Of course, tragically, farmers are being dangled. Americans that suffered through natural disasters, they're being dangled with disaster relief. And I think that's incredibly unfair.
It is unfair. I'll expand on why in a moment. But the establishment is telling us that everyone is concerned about getting farmers help and that everyone's concerned about the people suffering in North Carolina. But that's not true. You see, Ukraine, Africa, and other foreign priorities have been fully funded long before we Americans. And lest we forget, Congress funded FEMA, an agency that denied storm aid to Trump supporters. But we're told we must accept all of the crooked, anti-American, unconstitutional provisions in this cramnibus so we can help our suffering fellow Americans.
This was the conservative play call. We don't normally like what's called a continuing resolution, a CR, but in this case it makes sense because if we push it into the first quarter of next year, then we have a Republican-controlled Congress and President Donald J. Trump back in the White House will be able to have more say over the funding decisions for 2025. Now, that would have been an easier thing to do, but then we had circumstances outside of our control. We had these emergencies that are required. So we had, as you know, a record hurricane season. We had Helene and Milton, and they just did massive destruction across our red states, frankly, in the southeast and the eastern side of the country. And then we've had farmers who are in jeopardy of permanently going under. They've had 3 lost years in a row because of Bidenomics and inflation and other circumstances outside of their control.
Well, now I know why the last 2 Republican speakers refused to come on this program. They can't afford to have me ask questions they can't honestly answer. What you just heard from Speaker Johnson was a massive line of BS. There is nothing conservative about this CR. And for the last 27 years, those claiming to be conservative have been voting for fake budgets called continuing resolutions and omnibus overspending measures because they gifted us a government that has grown beyond the consent of the governed. And then they were too lazy to give it proper oversight. So they just put overspending on autopilot. What is Speaker Johnson, in collusion with Chuck Schumer, planning on passing in exchange for money that will finally be spent on Americans? Well, because Congress is the most loathed and despised institution in America, and with the FBI and DOJ still around, that's saying something. Congress, after saddling you with massive inflation, massive illegal immigration, massive crime, basically failing to do the jobs they were elected to do, they think they deserve a raise.
Members are giving themselves a pay raise. Do you guys deserve a pay raise?
Well, that's news to me. It's good news. You know, what has it been, 10 years or 14 years and no COLA, no change at all? I think it's about time something's done.
You support giving yourselves a pay raise?
How would I not know about a pay raise?
But I mean, people look at the performance of Congress and say, why should we give them more money?
What about the media? Think about that for a second.
We're not paid by public money.
I know you're not, but I mean, half of your listeners are not there anymore. You're still getting the same paycheck? What's going on?
Public money, it's called taxpayers' money. The arrogance and incompetence. Dick Durbin there didn't even know that the lobbyists who are likely writing these bills gave Congress, an institution that has undertaken criminal activity, a raise for their disgusting and un-American performance.
Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois, a Democrat who's been in office since 1997. In their defense, as he said, they have not had a raise in about 12, 13 years. How many people do you know that would stay at the same job if they didn't even get a cost of living raised, like he said, COLA, for 12, 13 years? Not that many people are going to stay, right? Except they have donor money, expense accounts, insider trading. Also in the bill, which Chris didn't mention, aside from the pay raise, is expanded federal health care benefits, which they get for life. And the bill, which is 1,500 pages and was given to members like a day in advance, does include $250 million to increase access to child care, $25 million to protect the homes of Supreme Court justices, more than $100 billion for disaster relief, billions for farmers. There is good stuff in there. There's also a provision that gives Washington, D.C. more control over land and negotiations for a new Washington Commanders Stadium at the site of the old Robert F. Kennedy Stadium. In case you don't know, the Commanders is the NFL team, formerly known as the Redskins. They now play in Landover, Maryland. And in return to Maryland, the federal government will cover the entire cost of rebuilding the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Maryland. You know, the one that was destroyed by a ship hitting it last year, and the shipping company paid a ton of money. We will pay for everything if you let us have our football team back. Vice President-elect J.D. Vance met with House Speaker Mike Johnson, who's now on the hot seat, last night.
I'm not going to say anything else more about it tonight because we're in the middle of these negotiations, but I think we'll be able to solve some problems here, and we'll keep working on it.
Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, no relation to Speaker Johnson, is one of many Republicans who said he will not vote for the bill.
Congressional leaders striking a bipartisan deal, hopefully to avert a government shutdown. The Senate needs to approve this huge, 1,500, 1,800 page bill, which features a lot of add-ons, including $100 billion in disaster relief, $10 billion in economic assistance for farmers. Elon Musk said, do not pass the bill. What do you make of this 3-month CR? And Speaker Mike Johnson, he wants to make the deal. He wants to make it happen. They've got a deadline. What do you think, sir?
Well, if it passes, it'll pass without my vote. Again, I don't know what congressional leadership on a bipartisan basis doesn't understand about a clean CR. And when we do spend money, focus the spending, target it properly. So again, this is just Washington, as business as usual. I'm not going to support it, but I guess we'll get this behind us and move on. And January 20th can't come soon enough.
Again, that's Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson on Newsmax with Lydia Serrani, who also asked the senator for an update on the investigation into Monday's horrific, deadly school shooting in his home state.
What are you hearing from investigators?
Well, again, what I read in the public reports, it's just incredibly sad across the board. This can be a very tough time for teenagers. They're influenced by all kinds of things. Here in America, we have not strengthened the American family. So many of our public policies have divided the American family. We need to focus on that. From my standpoint, I think renewed faith would be very helpful, more supportive communities. There are no easy answers here. It's just a tragedy. It's sad for everybody involved. Again, my condolences and prayers are with everybody that are victims of this tragedy.
Senator Johnson of Wisconsin, and of course, the media goes on and on and on about the shooter, who I only refer to as the shooter. You haven't heard much about the victims, right? We now know the names of the victims. Erin West, she was the teacher, 42 years old, Erin West, and the student, 14-year-old Ruby Vergara. Beautiful 14-year-old Ruby, killed inside a Christian school. Imagine Christmas for those families. Not only this Christmas, but every year to follow. And for the family of the shooter as well, right? A troubled young girl who took her own life. And what about the 100 or so hostages still being held by Hamas, including several Americans and their families? Overnight, Israel launched airstrikes on Houthi rebel targets in Yemen after they had launched strikes on Israel several hours earlier, a week ahead of the celebration of the birth of Christ. According to the Houthi media on X, yes, there's such a thing, Houthi media, at least nine people were killed, several others injured by the Israeli airstrikes that targeted power stations near Yemen's capital city and an oil facility in another region of Yemen. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, said the airstrikes were retaliation for Houthi attacks on Israel over the past several months, not only the attack yesterday, and that most of them were intercepted. This is Donald Trump's newly appointed ambassador to Israel, former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee on Newsmax.
I spoke to a group of hostage families just last week. My heart is just broken for them. To think about all these days, over 400 days, not knowing if your family member is alive or dead, how they've been treated, are they going to get out? But I think this started moving when Donald Trump made it very clear to Hamas, if those hostages aren't out by the time I take office, Donald Trump said, you'll have hell to pay. Now, that's the way you deal with these people. And I wish that had been the approach that the Biden administration has taken. Instead, they've spent most of these 400-plus days lecturing Israel how to prosecute the war, and a lot less time trying to demand of Hamas and their Iranian checkbook writers to let these hostages go. So let's hope they get out. Frankly, I don't care who gets credit for it. If Joe Biden wants to take credit, if they get out today, fine. But these families need their loved ones back, and it should have already happened. But let's pray it happens today.
Let's pray it happens. And this is the Holy Land. People forget about that, right? This is the holiest of holy lands. We have the holy season upon us, Christmas, Hanukkah. Also, I wanted to ask you, have you communicated with your Israeli counterpart? Because you're coming into this new position. Have you talked to your counterpart there?
Yeah, Jack Lew, who is the current ambassador, he and I had a phone call. It was very warm and kind. I could not have asked for him to be more helpful and accommodating. He didn't have to do that. But it's very clear that he wants there to be a very smooth transition. Of course, I still have to go through the Senate confirmation, so I'm not the ambassador yet, and I won't be until that process is completed. But I have every confidence that if I have any questions to ask of the current ambassador, he's more than willing to be available and be helpful. And I really, genuinely appreciate that.
Former Arkansas governor, former presidential candidate, and soon-to-be U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, who, as he mentioned, still needs to be confirmed with all of Trump's other appointments. Yesterday, Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn spoke about the process on American Agenda.
The meetings are going very well, and President Trump's nominees are doing great. The meetings are positive. I think what you see is they're changing people who maybe have been in neutral. They're changing them to a yes. That's a very good thing. And we look forward to pushing these hearings in the first part of January and then on January 20th. As soon as President Trump is inaugurated, we will return to the Senate chamber and we will begin holding votes to confirm these nominees. We're looking forward to it.
Senator, we know you introduced a legislative package dubbed the DOGE Acts, of course, named after Trump's Department of Government Efficiency. Now, your bills seek to reduce federal agency spending and trim the federal workforce. Of course, that's the goal of DOGE. Tell us what's in your bills and also what type of conversations you may have had with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy about them.
Yes, indeed. Vivek and I did several things during the campaign. And of course, the bills are bills that I have had around for years. And Claudia Tenney, Congresswoman Tenney, is carrying this in the House. There are 3 bills that deal with across-the-board cuts in our discretionary non-defense spending. This is a 1%, which is called the penny plan, 2% or 5% across-the-board cut. That gives you a foundation to begin to reduce the size and scope of these departments. Also freezing federal spending, federal salaries, and federal hiring. We lose about 80,000 federal employees every year through retirement. So let's begin to reposition individuals and let's freeze the hiring until we can decide what positions we need or don't need in the federal government. The third would look at moving federal agencies out of Washington, D.C. And then you also have provisions that require people to return to work. And instead of getting a pay raise just because you've been here for a while, it would give you a merit-based pay raise. For people that actually are doing the job and are being good stewards of the taxpayer's dollar.
I know that's what a lot of people voted for D.C. to do this kind of work, Senator. So we appreciate you talking about that.
Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee on American Agenda with Bob Brooks and Katrina Zish. It was the DOGE, right? Department of Government Efficiency, that sank the pork stuff spending bill. If Congress fails to come to an agreement by Saturday, the federal government could be shutting down, which means, among other things, that you could have some angry, disgruntled TSA workers and, even worse, air traffic controllers during the holiday travel rush. I don't want to be that guy that makes a big deal about it because we know they will get paid retroactively, right? But let's be realistic. Nobody under any circumstances is ever happy about not getting paid, especially on Christmas week, right? Or the week after Christmas. President Biden and the First Lady are headed back to the White House today after spending a few days in Delaware. Yesterday marked the anniversary of the car accident in Delaware that killed President Biden's first wife, Nelia, and his infant daughter, Naomi. The president attended a private memorial mass there at a church in Wilmington with the First Lady and members of the Biden family. Let's wrap it up with Congressman Jim Jordan of Ohio, chair of the House Judiciary Committee, on Rob Schmitt Tonight. Last night, discussing this clip of Chuck Schumer and then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi on January 6th, 2021.
Well, D.C. has requested the National Guard, and it's been denied by DOD. I'd like to know a good reason why it's been denied. The whole Capitol is rampage. There's a picture of someone sitting in this chair of the Senate. We've all been evacuated. There have been shots fired. We need a full National Guard component now. We need help right away. Thank you, Secretary. Bye-bye. They have not denied it. I spoke to the Secretary of the Army. He's given the full okay to give the National Guard. He said it was not denied. I'm going to call up the effing Secretary of DOD.
That was just before 3:30 p.m. on January 6th. The D.C. National Guard was not actually approved to move into the area until after 5 p.m. Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan would have been on the original J6 Select Committee, but Pelosi couldn't have allowed that for obvious reasons. We now know why. And it's good to see you, sir. Your thoughts on the report that came out yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, we knew that Cassidy Hutchinson had said things that just were not accurate. I mean, she talked about this note that, was there, but we know Eric Hirschman wrote that note, one of President Trump's lawyers that she was referring to. We know that there was contrary testimony to, when supposedly President Trump went over the back seat and grabbed the steering wheel when the Secret Service were driving. We know that's not accurate. And it doesn't surprise me. We had actually worked on looking at Cassidy Hutchinson's, testimony. None of this surprised me, Rob, because I caught him lying about me several times. They altered an email, changed the punctuation, said that I had sent it when I had forwarded it from a lawyer who was the former inspector general at the Department of Defense. So it's like nothing surprises me with this group. I appreciate Congressman Loudermilk's work.
Yeah. The report states the failure to communicate the order in a timely manner has never been addressed by either DOD or oversight bodies, including the Select Committee. So that failure there, they've just overlooked all of that, which, again, speaks to the fact that that the whole point of this was not to figure out what happened on January 6th. The whole point of it was just to severely damage Trump, to prevent him from ever being able to take hold of power again in this country.
Yeah, totally. It was designed to go after the president. Any evidence that was, positive for the president, well, we can't have that. So they just looked like they ignored it or got people to change their story and say things that, again, I think, but when you have contrary testimony, demonstrate that what they put forward was just not accurate. But what I think is amazing is this was just one of a multi-step plan to get the president all the way back to when the Russia collusion thing, to the Mueller investigation, to this, to the 14th Amendment, to the 4 cases, Alvin Bragg, Fani Willis, Jack Smith. None of it worked because the truth was always on the president's side.
Yeah. And, I don't think you have to be, for a lot of people out there, it's not that it's a sycophantic Trump thing, that he did nothing wrong. There were mistakes were made. After that election was a terrible time for him. We understand that. But the people that have called this an attempted insurrection, which is what they've escalated it to, have now seen their credibility so completely gutted by anybody who objectively looks at the facts of that day. The idea that Trump sent a mob to the Capitol to unleash them to try and hold on to power is just beyond ridiculous. And again, we can never trust any of these people. Anybody who's spewed the word insurrection about that day and still spews it this day can never be trusted on anything again. They're obviously partisan, so partisan that they can't even tell the truth when there's this much information all these years later. And Trump posted this overnight talking about one of them, who is Liz Cheney, saying she could be in a lot of trouble based on the evidence that's been obtained here. Broke numerous federal laws, according to the report. Violations should be investigated by the FBI. Witness tampering is no joke. Yeah. And the point I really want to make is that this is a committee that already, Trump was already set up to fail by this. Like, there was no way to defend himself. They already just stacked the deck against him. And yet still, she's doing a back channel communication with a witness.
Yeah, again, it was a rigged job to go after the president, no doubt about it. And how about this? It took them 4 years to tell us what we all suspected, that they had confidential human sources, which is a fancy name for spies, at the Capitol that day. 26 of them. Some of them were tasked to be there. The FBI said, we need you to go there. Others came. 4 of them went in the Capitol, broke the law. 0 were arrested. So, it took you 4 years to tell us that. You had to wait till after the election to get us that information. This whole thing, talk about government being turned on the very people it's supposed to serve, weaponized against we the people, example after example. And of course, the biggest example is what they did to President Trump.
New revealing evidence every single day. Now, Congressman Jim Jordan on Rob Schmitt Tonight. Reports of possible witness tampering by Liz Cheney. This will continue to be a big story on Newsmax today for sure. Be sure to keep up with all of the news and breaking developments throughout the day on Newsmax, Newsmax 2, and Newsmax.com. It all begins each and every morning with Wake Up America, National Report, American Agenda, Carl Higbee, Greta Van Susteren, Finnerty, Ed Henry, Chris Salcedo, and much, much more. I'm Tony Marino. Thank you, as always, for listening to the Newsmax Daily. Continue to share it with your friends and family, and please subscribe on whatever podcast platform you may be listening to. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, Friday Eve, right? And Thursday Night Football features a great AFC matchup, the Denver Broncos at the Los Angeles Chargers. Playoff implications. And keep on fighting the good fight.
News breaks every minute, every day. You need the app, the Newsmax app. Find it free on your smartphone store. Then watch us anytime, anywhere.
Relentlessly slowing the spread of the stupid every day. It's the Rob Carson Show.
Hey, it's Rob Carson. My podcast is about leading-edge commentary and opinion, great guests, and the biggest political comedy in the country. My satire was featured on the Rush Limbaugh program for over a decade, and now it's fresh and new and on my podcast. It's not just another desk-pounding conservative tirade. It's about entertaining, informing, and motivating. Patriotism and hope. You don't need more stress in your life. You need to feel good and, dare I say, even laugh. Subscribe and download at your favorite podcast platform or go to newsmax.com/listen.
Information. Truth is freedom.